place, the Chicago Board of Trade, a place known for bustling activity and excitement as traders buy and sell at the nation's largest commodity market. The date, August 20th, reported to be the biggest, wildest trading day in the entire 122-year history of this world marketplace. The frantic activity jams the tote boards as 190 million bushels of corn will change hands, 60 million bushels more than the previous all-time high. What precipitated this record trading was the reaction by brokers that this year's anticipated 4.8 billion bushels of corn would be reduced anywhere from 5 to 50% because of blight. The story of corn is as American as the continent's first inhabitants, who took a wild grass and made it more fruitful. Even on the rocky peaks of Central and South America, the ancient Indians planted maize, to which they often erected temples as the pagan object of worship. The planting tool used by these Indian people was simply a long stick with a sharpened end, and harvesting usually consisted of cutting the stalks with hand knives. Corn became valuable not only for food, but its stalks were used for building material. The American Indian further developed maize through the use of mass selection, and according to historians, had under cultivation perhaps 50,000 acres of corn in North America. When the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria brought the first white men to the shores of the New World, they encountered this new grain called maize. When the Pilgrims came to Plymouth Rock, their landing party, led by Miles Standish, found a basket of Indian corn, a food which the Indians for months to come traded for trinkets, a food which sustained the survivors of that little colony through their first hard winter in the land of promise. One of the survivors penned these words inscribed on a monument located on what is believed to be the very spot where Miles Standish found the corn. And sure it was God's good providence that we found this corn, or else we know not how we should have done. As the colonists grew in number and populated the eastern seaboard, they cleared the forest and planted corn, their mainstay of food. From these settlements, frontiersmen pushed ever west, taking courage in the fact that the corn in their wagons could be planted just about anywhere and on new cleared land. Then gold was discovered, and pioneers crossed the continent in search of its wealth. Today, however, the value of the annual yield of gold mined in our country is exceeded 100 times by the annual yield of golden nuggets of corn. Now we grow so much corn that if all the cornfields were placed side by side, they would make a field of 60 million acres, which is larger than the states of New York and Pennsylvania combined. Corn is the #1 cultivated crop in the United States, which is the largest crop-producing country in the world. Henry Wallace, former Secretary of Agriculture, said corn is more the symbol of the United States than the bald eagle. I'm George Menard. The success story of corn is due in a large measure to one of the most successful and effective government research and education programs established in this country, or the world for that matter, the United States Department of Agriculture, with its agencies in cooperation with state and regional agricultural programs, has played a significant role in explaining to the nation's farmers what to expect and what steps to take in dealing with the corn blight problem. This is exemplified in a statement by the Undersecretary of Agriculture, J. Philip Campbell.
We have been doing our best to anticipate how the blight might behave in 1971, but at this stage we can't be sure because of several factors which cannot be fully assessed until next spring or summer. Factors which will have some bearing on next summer's extent of and damage caused by this disease include the following: the level to which the blight fungus survives a rigorous winter in the heart of the corn belt, the availability of seed corn strains resistant to this new form of corn blight, and weather conditions during the growing season conducive for rapid development and spread of the disease.
Working at the grassroots level, state extension agents such as Kelsey Driscoll, in conjunction with farmers and workers from agricultural colleges, relay information to the reporting services for assembly on a state and nationwide basis. Technical and research experts at the various state institutions and the Agricultural Center at Beltsville, Maryland, conduct extensive testing, explain the facts, and discuss the solutions. The USDA brings together the farmer and consulting services of state, regional, and even national experts to share information and answers. At this meeting, Dr. A.S. Williams, plant pathologist at the University of Kentucky, stated how the blight came about.
This was primarily due to the fact that we had three conditions which came together, which assisted in the development of this epiphytotic. Primarily, it's a result of the development of a new race of Helminthosporium matis, which is the cause of this particular disease. And second, because we had favorable environmental conditions developed this year, which was always necessary for a disease to develop. And third, we had a rather uniform host plant which was susceptible to this particular disease.
The fungus, the variety, the weather. These three ingredients make up the southern leaf corn blight problem. The fungus, officially called Helminthosporium matis, has a highly virulent airborne microscopic spore. Shaped somewhat like an extremely tiny banana, it lands upon the leaf of a corn plant where it produces tube-like extensions which penetrate leaf cells, killing them. Feeding upon the dead matter, the fungus grows a mass of filaments called mycelium inside the leaf. On the outside, there are lesions that appear as brown spots, which expand, causing portions of the leaf to turn prematurely brown. This greatly reduces the plant's ability to produce grain and its value as silage. The new race of fungus also attacks the leaf sheaths, stalks, shucks, and usually the ear and kernels, thus creating a variety of problems depending upon the stage of ear development. If the fungus hits the corn early, the kernels will not even form, leaving only an empty cob. In later stages, an ugly black mold frequently covers the kernels, making them unfit for human consumption and of little nutritional value for animals. The cob is also affected, becoming soft and then chaffy as it dries. The banana-shaped spore, which invades the plant tissues, has a life cycle of about 60 hours, at which time millions of new spores are produced, each ready to cause new, widespread infection because of their rapid transmission through the air. The fungus, by attacking the stalk, may cause it to rot and fall over, increasing the crop loss in that the corn harvester is not able to reach the damaged ears and leaves them on the ground. Farmers and agronomists have noted southern corn blight in small amounts for many years. In fact, Hugo Grauman of the USDA suggests they're being around for the last 50 years or so. However, it was only at the end of the 1969 season that the destructive new race, which reached epidemic proportion this year, was discovered in the United States. But this fungus, which looks almost identical to the previous races of southern leaf blight, has proven to be deadly in its effect and devastating in its coverage. In the improvement of corn through the mass selection methods produced by the Indians over thousands of years, we have recently developed sophisticated corn hybrids. We have doubled and even tripled yields, providing varieties of corn for such things as improved taste, various growth characteristics, and resistance to wind, drought, insects, and disease. There are over 200 kinds of corn in the world. Normally, the United States grows only 3 kinds, but numerous varieties within each kind. The third and most variable factor contributing to the blight is the weather. Had it not been for Hurricane Becky, chances are the blight would have been restricted primarily to Florida, where it was first noted in early summer. These hurricane winds carried the airborne spore through Georgia, the Carolinas, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, and into the Corn Belt states of Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, and northward even to Canada. But the weather not only transmitted the blight spores, it provided the ideal condition for its infestation. This summer was the most humid the Corn Belt states have had in years. The heavy dews, which lasted late into the morning, created an ideal host for catching floating spores, holding them to the leaf and nurturing their germination. But perhaps the major question is not what the blight is or what caused it, but rather what are its effects. The first person to feel those effects is the farmer. So we talk to him. Typical of the farms visited in Illinois, one of the leading corn-producing states, was the Max Wilson farm near Shawneetown. Wilson planted 2 bushels of this blight-resistant corn. All the rest was the Texas male sterile type. Mr. Wilson, because of the corn blight, what yield do you expect from your crop?
Probably got a 25% crop this year.
What does this mean in terms of bushels you expected but actually got because of the corn blight?
Ordinarily, we make from 100 to 120 bushel, and this year it'll probably be 25.
If instead of 100 bushels you are only getting 25, how are you going to feed your pigs?
Well, we'll have to buy corn from outside somewhere.
I believe you said you also raise popcorn. How are you going to use this year's crop?
We're going to feed the popcorn to the cattle this time with dressing on the silage.
Having to buy the corn for 600 pigs and use all his popcorn crop to get his 800 cattle through the winter because of the blight will cause Mr. Wilson some problems. At the southern boundary of the major corn-producing states is Kentucky, which was hit severely. Here, it was not unusual to find farms such as Robert Church's in Woodburn, where the yield was so low that rather than harvesting the corn, it was chopped for silage. In this field, the grain yield was about 5 bushels per acre. Some farmers wore masks, as suggested by agricultural advisory bulletins, to avoid respiratory problems from the dust of the blighted corn. In some cases, farmers were using a small grain head on the combine to pick up the rotted fallen stalks which the corn picker could not reach. In Robards, Kentucky, we talked to George Courtney, Jr. as to how the blight was going to affect him.
Well, I think I'm going to change. I think I'm going to small grain farming and not grow any corn next year. I think I'm just going to grow small grains. I'm just going to plant the wheat, the feed to feed with, and I'm going into hog and cattle business. And I just ain't going to raise no corn.
Courtney's plan to go to small grain farming is typical of the sentiments of many of the small farmers. Even traditional corn growers see some advantages to small grain farming, such as being able to double crop or harvest 2 crops in a season. The Hoosier State also had its share of blight, as 70% of its corn crop was affected. Again, the key factor was the variety of seed used. This is the Hirsch farm, a father and son team. They will get about 120 bushels per acre, which was a blight-resistant variety. Noting the traces of blight in previous years, young Hirsch said, "We felt it was unwise to put all our eggs in one basket, so this year we planted 10 varieties of corn." Just across the highway from the Hirsches is the Larry Lant farm. Although he usually plants about 400 acres in corn, Land planted a little over 100 acres this year. He too planted several varieties.
Well, I was very fortunate in that, just lucky really, that I got some seed corn that was resistant to the blight. Most of it was, some of it wasn't, and it was hard hit.
What yield did you plan to get, and how did it turn out this year?
Normally I would hope to get, I fertilize and would hope to get maybe 110 to 20 bushels the acre. The corn that was hit by the blight badly this year was like 40 bushel the acre. The better corn that was blight resistant still is 100 bushel the acre corn.
What are your plans in the future in regard to corn planting?
Well, hopefully I'll keep planting corn. I hope to get a resistant variety, next year for seed. Also, some of our neighbors have gotten together and harvested some corn on the ear, which they will dry and shell and replant, which normally nobody's done in this area for 30 years, I suppose, since hybrid seed corn has been in full use.
Lant typifies the response of what many farmers are thinking and a few are planning, that of drying and storing their own corn and planting it for seed. But using this second-generation corn, or F2, is risky business, resulting in a 10 to 30% reduction because of its genetic variation. And so the story went in state after state in the Corn Belt and surrounding areas. Iowa, the land of the tall corn, reporting severe losses in some sections. In Tennessee, where one farmer said he made one pass through his cornfield with the combine and decided to plow the field under as a total loss. In marked contrast, some farmers, even in the hard-hit areas, did not realize there was a corn blight. Next to the farmer, the man who feels the effects of the blight is the seed corn producer. It could place the small companies in serious financial difficulty because they cannot absorb large losses. One big seed company threw out 2/3 of this year's seed production. Although seed companies grow much of their own seed, it is not unusual to contract with farmers to grow seed for them.
This represents some of our seed corn here, a very small portion, of course, that was brought in from the field for seed purposes to our processing plant here. And naturally, as you can see, it's certainly not suitable for seed, so we're going to have to discard it and feed it to livestock. This seed here is affected by the Southern Leaf Blight, and this is a new strain of Southern Leaf Blight that we did not have last year. We contracted with the farmer for growing this corn and pay him a specified rate per acre, and naturally we will fulfill our contract to the farmer, but at the same time we wind up here without any seed, which you can see that we're going to take a loss on this particular field of corn.
While the seed producers are having drastic reductions in corn that can be used for seed, farmers are ordering more seed and placing their orders early. One of the big three seed companies stated, "Our advanced sales to farmers already exceed last year's total sales by 20%, even though our seed will be considerably higher." The problem is much, if not most, of the seed for next year's corn crop will have some form of blend of the cytoplasm which is susceptible to the blight. Consequently, seed companies have been asked to place a special tag clearly stating the type and amounts of different cytoplasm contained in the seed. A practice already in effect by Stoll Brothers, a medium-sized seed corn company, which is the major industry of Seabury, Kentucky. We asked the president of Stoll Brothers Seed, R.O. Stoll, just how nature managed to get the upper hand over modern science technology.
No one really has an answer as to how this happened or why it happened, but it caught everyone by surprise. No one had any idea that anything like this was in the making.
What effect will this corn blight have on the price of seed corn in the future?
Well, the seed corn will have to be higher for the simple reason that we will all have to go to fertile hybrids. We will have to produce corn by detasseling and leave the steriles completely out of the picture.
In addition to the cost of seed and a substantial outlay for fertilizer, the farmer needs a great deal of costly equipment. Basic is the tractor, which may cost from $4,000 to $20,000. To this may be added attachments such as a plow, disc, cultivator, mowing machine, and post hole digger, each of the 5 costing an average of $1,000 apiece. Adding this to trucks, combines, and other items, it is not unusual for a grain farmer to have $50,000 to $75,000 invested in equipment. Because of these costs, John Housechild of Evansville, Indiana, will not soon forget the blight of 1970.
It looks pretty bleak. I'm going to have to borrow money next year to put out my crop. In the future, it won't hurt so much this year as next year, because we always sell our crop in the following year, and this problem is going to affect all the men all the way down the line. Your fertilizer dealers, your gas men, your implement dealers. Your implement dealers is starting to holler already. Nobody's buying any new machinery. They can't afford it. 8% interest.
We've been worried about our customers ever since this blight thing started last summer, but we really didn't know what impact it'd have on us. But it really came home to us the other day when a boy came in. He'd been farming about 7 or 8 years, and his situation was this. He bought a big tractor like this from us last year, and he also had another unit that was about 3 years old that he had fair equity in, and a used combine. He said, "Bob, there's only way I can do is make the interest and make the payment another year." Well, when you buy a big tractor like this, an outfit, maybe $10,000, $12,000, $15,000, this first year payment is real important to keep your equity in the machinery. And there's no way to extend a payment a whole year on a new piece of equipment. His situation will be, I think, that last year he had about a $16,000 corn crop. This year he had about $6,000. By the time he finished putting his fertilizer and seed corn, around $2,500 out of the $6,000, he barely has enough to live on, much less making payments on his machinery. It looked like the only thing we can do would be to take this machine back, resell it to somebody else, and there's a boy that's worked awfully hard, and he's lost his complete line of equipment.
The farmer's loss is also passed on to those who buy his products. First, the grain elevator, where the farmer sells or stores his corn. Before selling or storing, samples of the farmer's corn are collected and tested. Results of the test are called into the office before the truck gets on the scales, so that the weigher knows what grade of corn is on the truck and into what bin it is to be stored. This storage unit, which can hold 1,300,000 bushels of grain, is owned by Central Soya, located in Henderson, Kentucky. Estimates of the approximate loss to the farmers in Henderson County alone approach $3 million, and that represents a major portion of net farm profit available for recirculation in the community. Before the blight, it was not unusual to see 50 trucks line up at one time, unloading as much as 100,000 bushels of grain in one day. Now, they are few and far between, and the bins are not filled.
We here at Central Soya operate the grain elevator, receiving grain from farmers in the tri-state area and from grain dealers in northern Indiana. We dry, condition it, prepare it for shipment to feed mixing trade in the southeast and the corn milling trade in the southeast. The corn blight has caused a substantial reduction in production and will decrease the volume of business in the elevator trade, and we will end up with increased product cost in both meat and the products of corn. This will probably be a 2-year factor until we get sufficient supplies of blight-resistant seed.
And so the blight story goes. In the hard-hit areas, decreased production, increased cost, transmitting ever-widening circles of some effect upon virtually everyone in the United States and many abroad, as exports of corn annually contribute $1 billion to our balance of payments in world trade. Here is USDA Director of Agricultural Economics, Don Parlberg.
People are interested in the supply of meat and milk and eggs that are produced from feed. We have ample supplies of feed with our carryover to meet our needs for the foreseeable future. If, however, the 1971 crop should be a poor one, we then might see some reduction in the supply of these livestock products and some increase in price. But with the abundant supply of resistant seed available for the year 1972. Whatever difficulty we might have for our food supply would be of short duration.
What about the future? There will still be the fungus which can survive the winter. There will still be the blight-susceptible seed in at least 60% of the 1971 crop. That means whether we have the blight next year depends greatly upon the weather. Realizing the significance of this factor, the USDA has initiated weather project studies on corn blight. The aim of this project, called NC94, is to make the farm climate as productive and risk-free as possible under modern agricultural techniques. But as yet, there is no significant data to make predictions. Many of the other world food crops, such as wheat, potatoes, cocoa, and coffee, have been severely attacked by diseases in the past. Perhaps because corn has been a relatively healthy plant, we have taken too much for granted concerning our abundance of food and fiber. Nature seems to have found a vulnerable spot in our methods of crop improvement. Questions now arise that will demand the attention of plant scientists and biochemists to learn more about the actual mechanisms of genetic resistance to plant diseases and to uncover our possible mistakes of the past. Fortunately, progress in the biological sciences has reached a point where this may be possible. But in the meantime, the blight of 1970 will leave its scars. It will affect the income of thousands of farmers and the expenditures of thousands of consumers. Our hope for winning the battle of the blight must lie in further technological advances. The bountiful harvest must continue.